Welcome to Brave. Be inspired by the best leaders of Southeast Asia tech. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. I'm Jeremy Au, a VC, founder, and father. Join us for transcripts, analysis, and community at www.jeremyau.com. Hi, Xi Liu. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited because you're tackling a really important topic in Southeast Asia. So I'm excited to share not just your personal journey, but also hear your thoughts on the space in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on the podcast. Super excited to share some personal stories. I'm so new to the startup world or Southeast Asia, but then it's definitely a very cool learning journey for me for the past year here.
Awesome. So, for those who don't know you yet, could you share a little bit about your professional journey?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently the founder and the CEO of Ferne Health. We do at-home testing services for common sexual health. That includes the STD testings or some common women's concerns, including discharge testing or UTIs. So I started the company a year ago, decided to tackling this a very taboo topic in Southeast Asia. As personally, when I grew up, I didn't learn enough and got enough services accessing women's health. So prior to starting this company, I was in Silicon Valley, mainly working in tech. My last job was actually a product manager at Amazon, nothing related to what I'm doing right now. And I personally grew up in China, so spent the past few years in Silicon Valley and then now Singapore.
What was it like moving from China to the States for your masters and for work? What was it like? Is it a culture shock?
I would say it was interesting. Especially that was a very different life stage for me when I was graduating from college and entering more professional world. So it was definitely very interesting. I started learning a lot of things from scratch. So for one, I guess professionally, we work in a very different way in Asia and versus in US. People encourage more innovation in the way they encourage people to do to chase their dreams. So when you have a good idea and instead of a lot of judgmental rejection from people around me, I think I heard a lot of encouragement or even mentorship from different people to trying to encourage me to actually to make it work. And another thing, of course, life-wise, starting from getting out of college and started working, having my own life and started trying to figure out what to do in my personal life and how to take care of my life was also a very interesting journey that I started learning how to go to a doctor and how to talk to people. And this all actually led to why I started a business in this space later.
Awesome. That's amazing. And where did you grow up in China? So I know you studied university at Beijing, where I did an internship at Tsinghua and I worked there for a bit. But which part did you grow up in Beijing, or did you grow up somewhere else in China?
So I grew up in Xi'an and also a little bit in Beijing. I went to middle school in Beijing, then did my high school in Xi'an, then come back to Beijing for my college. So my family used to move around every 2-3 years, and I got to I think that's when I started getting a really good adaptability because I had to make new friends every 3 years and getting into a new school and trying to meet new people. So it was very interesting.
What would you say is the difference between Xi'an and Beijing from your perspective?
That's a very interesting question. I think we got more chance or opportunities to learn new things when I was in Beijing. I think it's a more massive city, and then you got to see a lot of a new innovation, a lot of new shows. It's probably one of the best cities in China where you got to get in touch with a lot of international services or even just a culturally, you got more international what do you call it, services and products, or even just information channels. Versus in Xi'an, it's still a little bit more lacked. And so people turn to more focusing on what they see every day and what they learn every day. So I still remember even when I was in college in Beijing, I got to see all of the good concerts and got to see all of the good exhibitions. So that's actually when I learned a lot of things about IoTs or smart cities because I got to see enough. So later on, when I moved to like US or Silicon Valley, and when I started working on all of those hands-on products, it's more like, oh wow, I saw this like 4 years ago in this exhibition in Beijing, and now I'm actually working on it. So it's very awesome.
Amazing. And, for the viewers don't get to see this, but, this looks like a bedroom of yours from before. How old were you in this bedroom with the fairies and everything?
Yeah, I was just joking about this room. So I painted this room actually when I was probably 17 or 18. I wasn't that young anymore, but you can tell. I think me personally, I think I changed a lot in the past probably 10 years. Like when I was a teenager, of course, like my life dream is like this fairy on the wall that I want a nice sweet life and having fun and have a good life. And then it's probably very foreign for me when I was like 17, 18 to think about, oh, I want to be a very professional career driven woman and to start like creating something super new. So it's very different. And like years later, yeah, so when I look at the fairies on the wall, it's like, oh, wow, that was cute. Never thought about I would be in a space so tabooed right now and talking about all of the things people don't feel comfortable talking about every day.
So, what do you think led to that change, right? From that person who, has drawn, I think, plants, vines, I guess, and the fairies on a wall, on a purple wall in your bedroom, to where you are today, tackling, sexual wellness in Southeast Asia. So, what happened? Did America happen? What happened here?
Maybe American changed me. I think for one, my life stage changed. When I was younger, or everyone, especially in Asian culture, we really respected this. You find a comfortable zone, and then you stay in your comfort zone. Like, don't do things that other people don't do. So, of course, my life goal back then was very simple: to have a sweet life and live like what's in the fairy tale, like a princess. But then as you grow up, or as I grew up, I started seeing more things that all of the things I probably didn't learn when I was younger. And the information I never got to receive. For example, growing up, I didn't know there are so many disease or infections. No one told me about those. And then I didn't know as a mature adult, not only my small world, and besides I have like way much more things I should be thinking about or like scoping out, and so I think that those are kind of things like definitely changed me a lot. And also on the other hand, living abroad in a very different culture that was fundamentally different from where I came from, definitely helped me to rethink about life, or like rethink about what kind of like a life value I want to achieve. Do I really want to stay in a glass door and having a nice life and having my small world, or do I actually want to go out to help more people who do not have resources, or do I want to change, make some impact in the world that people can actually be impacted by my changes? And those kind of things are definitely happened in the past few years.
So, sounds like America was a big transformation in terms of just work experience, but also in terms of culture. So you earlier shared that you had some stories about America. Could you share some stories about America?
Yeah, definitely. Living in American, or just generally speaking, living in a Western culture, have helped me to like reshape a lot of views. For one, very relevantly to what I'm doing right now. When I first moved to US, I think it's very common you could get contraceptives or like testings in a school campus, versus like in Asia growing up, it's a very awkward thing to even talk about the sex, or like I felt very shy to talk about such a thing. But when my classmates just randomly brought it up, or my friend would just randomly mention, oh, I haven't gotten my period because I was on this contraception for like this long, it was very shocking. But then meanwhile, I was kind of jealous of people who felt so free to talk about things, versus, a lot of people from Asian countries are like more shy, and we have so much holdback whenever trying to speak up. So I think that was a very interesting thing. Like definitely when I was 22, like looking at other people living such a different lifestyle. And the second thing was actually more relevant to when I started working. Like for myself, when I was growing up, I think people in school or the society, people endorse those more humble or modest people who are hardworking and very focusing on hands-on work, versus those who step out and talk about what they are trying to achieve. So that was fundamentally in my working style. But then when I started working, I started seeing so many leaders, or especially women leaders, or people who trying to step up and trying to help younger, more junior people to improve their working styles. And they really believe in the thing about giving back to the community, like sharing their own experience to the younger ones, or making the junior ones to feel more empowered to talk about what they are thinking about. So I think that actually have made me to decide, actually helped me determine that making a startup or like doing a business on my own is a very meaningful things to do. It's not just like I focus on my work, but then I'm actually trying to share what I have done in the past, trying to inspire other people. So for those people who want to do the same, they can learn from my experience. I think that those changed me a lot.
Yeah, what was it like becoming a product manager, right? So there's no university degree that lets you say, I'm going to be a product manager when you come out. So, you did a couple of transitions, right? You changed from a more design centric thing and you became a product manager. So that's also a big transition as well. What was it like becoming a PM?
Yeah. First, I want to circle back a little. I personally did quite a few career switch in my like a past entire professional years. I went to college for game design, and it's very niche. So it's a game design and development. And at some point, I realized it wasn't my thing. So I started thinking about where's my passion landed, and then I decided to go for design. And then that's when I applied for a bunch of like grad school and got into Carnegie Mellon. And the program I went was a mini entrepreneurship program. Actually, we talked about a lot about product development, about leadership, but then those all sounded very foreign to me. Like at 22, it's like, oh, wow, leadership, that's cool. I have never worked before. So it's very interesting. And then so after graduation, I started my career in design, and like I moved to San Francisco and work in design. I think at some point I started feeling, looking at a product, and there are so many different aspects, and then going down into one path, either it's design or engineering or any side of the product, you're just focusing on one side. It's very, I think it's again like a link back to when we were growing up, all of us were taught to be a good craftsman. And you focus on one thing, you make it good, and you become the master of that single one piece. So I think that was my value. But then the more I dug into this path, I realized it's way much more than just the one aspect. A whole product or a whole service, a whole business is way much more than design. So that's when I decided to switch to a product manager. And my personal career switch was also another story. So when I decided I was gonna switch to product management, I talked to a lot of product managers in my team or like in the industry that I know. Lots of people shared a lot of personal advice, including you could go for a startup that didn't have a product manager, and then you could start as designer and then switch a year later. Or you could go after a MBA program and then learn your skills there. But to me, everything just sounded very complicated. I personally believe, I learned enough in the work environment. I have done enough work to become a good product manager, and I don't have to go through this path. So what I did was I went to the product team, talked to the product director, and I told him that I'm very interested in your team. I want to join your team to be a product manager. If you can give me the chance, and I could just, I would prove like all of the things I would promise to do. And he actually gave me the chance. So that was actually one of the most amazing transitions I have to say, like I've ever done before my startup. Was also when I think one thing I really appreciated that I learned in American that people do appreciate when you actually feel strongly about or like passionate about a thing, and if you feel like chasing it, they do give you the opportunities, and you can actually prove like you could do that.
So you have all these great opportunities, and what would you say are the cultural differences between Adobe and Amazon?
Oh, between Adobe and Amazon. Um, Adobe is a very software company. So it's decent size. I think Adobe is a very comfortable environment for people who enjoy working on one aspect in their profession. So if you want to be a designer, they have great design products. If you want to be an engineer, there are so many innovations that are happening inside Adobe. That's amazing. And Amazon, on the other hand, offers way much more opportunities for people who want to create different changes, and it's a more aggressive culture that in a sense if you want to make things happen, you could actually go pitch your idea and make things to work and fight for your resources. So that's definitely a good environment for a lot of people who appreciate such a culture.
So there you are. You have your PM experience in both, Adobe and Amazon. You've started to get used to the US saying, shocking things at work, like, give me a job and let me transfer departments. And there you are. And then suddenly you're like, oh, Southeast Asia, right? So what happened? How did this happen?
Um, yes. So yeah, again, like I mentioned, when I first graduated, starting a business was a very foreign concept for me, or starting a business in healthcare or in sexual health was definitely not on my to-do list. Throughout these years, when I was working in tech, I started learning what I really liked or I disliked. So among all of the things, I'm very passionate about building a idea from scratch, like nurturing a small seed from a basic seed that you bury it and then let it grow and get flowers. But then it's actually very hard to do such a thing in a massive company. So I like for most of the products or like good ideas we created inside a big team. The second when it gets a little bit more mature and it's about to getting blossom, and there might be some other things happen to the products and you have to shift the focus or like resources. So at some point I started thinking it might be a way much more exciting thing for me to actually just pick a seed and just bury it and then let it grow. So to nurture my own cause become one of my passions. That's when I decided I would do a startup. And to me, if I do a startup, there are two things that matter a lot. One is I have to personally resonate with the cause. Because if I don't understand my customers, why would I would never care about the problem just like they do. And then the second part is I wanted to have some social impact. Like I just mentioned, I personally was very intrigued by this giving back to community feeling that I have seen in my past professional work. That I think is a very powerful thing when you come back to a community and bring what you have learned that other people should learn, and to other people, who might be interested in learning. It's a very powerful thing for me. So that's when I started reflecting everything and thought about my personal experience, not knowing anything about sexual health, to learning so much when I was in a very different culture. And I talked to some friends and I did a small internal research and have learned it's not a thing just happening in China. It's a thing that's happening across whole Asia, that we just don't feel comfortable talking about personal issues. As a woman, we don't feel empowered to mention anything that's so taboo. So yeah, that's what brought me to Singapore. I decided I would do a startup in Asia, and the Singapore looks awesome. It's the center of like everything. So I moved to Singapore last year, having such a dream, building a startup in Singapore, and I started my journey here.
Wow, that's quite a ride, to decide that you want to build a business and you just pull out the map and you say Southeast Asia. So, what is it about Southeast Asia that you wanted to build this service? I mean, obviously, you could have built this for China. That's where you grew up. For Xi'an, for Beijing. So, what about Southeast Asia is interesting for you for this target market and problem?
For one, based on our research, when I was doing the internal research, talking to friends, I have noticed that this is not just a stigma problem from Chinese culture, but then across whole Southeast Asia or across the whole Asian culture. Doesn't matter if you grew up in Japan, Korea, Singapore, or Philippines, Malaysia, we all sort of like face the different level of taboo or stigma when it comes to women's health and sexual health. So I decided to choose Singapore because it's a more diverse and inclusive culture that we are able to meet pretty much all different kind of profiles of our target customers in Singapore alone, like having people from different culture here. And then the second reason is actually, so based on what we have researched, that for some other developing countries, besides the stigma, one big reason why women don't get like a proper healthcare is actually because of the resources. We have a lot of doctors in every country, but then the gynecologists, the rate among the doctors is actually very low. And then if you look at the gynaes, for some reason, there are a lot of male gynaes compared to females. So plus the culture taboo that we don't feel comfortable exposing ourselves to male doctors, it actually made it very challenging for a lot of women, especially in developing countries, to get proper cares. So lots of women would rather delay their checkups instead of going to spending like quite a few days or like a lot of money going to this very specific hospital and to get a checkup. So which is why I decided to choose Southeast Asia, just because besides Singapore, most of the regions here are still in a very developing state.
Oh, wow. And obviously, there's been quite a lot of interest in sexual wellness in terms of testing, in terms of contraception across Southeast Asia as well. So, what would you say is it that Ferne Health is doing really well versus everybody else?
I think it's actually one myth about, if we have enough clinics or doctors, people would feel empowered to see the doctors about their sexual health. The truth is, people nowadays, especially like millennials, Gen Zs, we care about the whole experience as a whole package, not just the harsh demand. So at Ferne Health, I think one thing we did particularly well is we always prioritize our customers' needs, their personal emotional needs, their physical needs, or just on the service level, what do they expect to achieve from our services? Compared to like the most traditional services or a lot of like new services available in the market, we spend quite some time trying to assessing each customer's needs by either giving them like questionnaires to fill up or talking to them in a very personal level and helping them to arrange even the most like basic things like booking an appointment or trying to figure out a link or talking to a doctor about some basic questions. We help each other to group the services, to provide the services as a more like companionship sort of the style. And that's what fundamentally I think makes us different. Because it's actually a very intimate topic that we are delivering to our customers about your sexual histories, about some maybe some symptoms you don't feel comfortable even to talk to your friends. So when we are building up such companionship or relationship with our customers, we're ultimately trying to provide a very safe space for them to feel comfortable opening up, not just because they need a basic care, like, oh, I need a test or I need this treatment, but then we're trying to provide a platform for them to speak up about their needs. I think this is also a different way to empower women to talk about their life.
That's awesome. And so obviously I can imagine, obviously lots of people are using Google to find you, as well as, some of the educational content that I know that you're putting out there as well. How else do people discover this topic? Is it like word of mouth? Is it a big thing here? Or is it more of something that's more taboo?
I do see some different patterns actually among my customers. I think customers above a certain age or they don't feel they're more bounded by the culture or like a taboo. They're more bounded by the cultural taboos. They don't feel comfortable talking to each other about such a personal concerns, and they would turn to go Google or just looking for some information channels, and that's probably how they actually encounter us, or even just because our social ads got to target them. But then for younger generations, especially for among our Gen Z customers, they are way much more outspoken. They have learned, I think when they grow up, they got more chances to learn from, either media or internet or other sources from the Western culture, that they have a very good awareness of like sexual health. So they're more progressive in terms of looking for resources, and they turn to talk to each other about different information channels or like resources. So word of mouth is definitely a bigger thing among our younger customers, which I personally feel very excited about to see. Because when I grew up, it's definitely not a thing that we would sit together in a group or like set up a student organization and talking about sexual health. But now, if you go into like NUS or NTU or even other colleges, you see all different kind of like student organizations. They are trying to also empower people to talk about removing the stigma around the sexual health, to help people to set up a proper or positive sex education. That's just a very awesome.
Wow. What else do you see are the differences between the younger generation that's coming up regarding sexual wellness versus the older generations?
I think their attitude also changed a lot. Towards the older generation, or not, probably not, older generation is probably not the word, but in people who grew up and got more impacted by our culture, I think they feel less empowered, for one, to even think about the sexual health. And for two, when it comes to such a topic, for them, it's very intrusive. There is a lot of stigma around why people need sexual health. A very common one is actually, oh, you only need to care about your sexual health if you live a very high risk life, or you have multiple partners, or you have done something horribly wrong. And that's actually very common if you talk to people who didn't grow up getting enough sex education, or they just fundamentally think this is not an important thing. But then when it comes to a more progressive group, and often the younger group, when you speak to them, you can tell such a stigma has already been improved a lot. People do understand there's so much more you should learn besides those people who are probably have like a higher concerns, and they understand the importance about prevention using contraceptives, and they also understand the importance about getting tested. They see sexual health as one part of the movement to understand themselves as a human, and to empower themselves to take care of their lives, instead of taking it as a very intrusive services towards some certain groups.
Wow, that's quite a bit to process, right? Because, obviously you're seeing there's the generational piece, and I'm also sure there's a cultural piece which you're alluding to, right? The Americans versus the expats versus the locals, and of course Southeast Asia is quite, distributed, and also within, the population, there are different subgroups, right? In terms of preferences and, attitudes towards, sexual wellness. I think when you look at all this, do you feel it's scary to tackle this topic, like the stigma, like, like, do you feel like people judge you or anything? Or I'm just kind of curious about that.
It's actually a very interesting topic that I got asked a lot. And sometimes I actually reflected such a thing and asking other people in the same industry or like in the same space. When I first started the business, I got a lot of pushback actually. So especially, when I first started, I was new to the field too. So in order to understand the industry or in order to set up such a business, I reached out to a lot of people trying to network in the startup world or from the investor side or even just in the relevant industry, for example, a lot of healthcare providers or professionals. And not everyone do understand the importance. For those people who care about sexual health or they have a better understanding of sex education, for example, expats in Singapore, and it's often natural to them, oh, this is a good idea. But then I definitely got a few judgments several times, and when I trying to explain what I was trying to build, and the people gave me a look and asked me why I care about such a thing. Is it because I personally are suffering from, one of the infections or I encountered some bad experience? I found it's very interesting because I think it's a very intrusive topic to even just bringing it up in a conversation for some people who are more bonded by the taboos. But then such a voice actually slowly went away. I think two things happened when that actually helped to change such a voice in the industry. For one, there are more and more sexual wellness services started to become available. And then so when more people started talking about such a topic and such a service, the taboo around it just become like lighter. Because you see people talk about this and then you realize, oh, this is just not just like one person who cares about this. This is not just the certain profiles I'm thinking about who care about such a topic, but then it's actually a normal thing. It's actually a very big step to normalize a taboo topic by encouraging more people to jump into such a movement or talking about such a topic. Another thing that happened, I think, another thing that happened to our services, before I launched the business, I got more pushback because it was an idea. So not many people believe some customers would benefit from such a service. But then once the business was set up, the services were available. And when we started getting a very deep bonding with our customers, when we started receiving so many positive reviews from our customers, and when we present such a positive feedback to those people who question us, it become a more powerful story. There are some women, especially younger women, who are suffering from such a taboo in the clinic. They got judged for some reasons that they were not expecting. And then this is what they shared with us. So it become more and more easier for us to actually bring up such a thing.
Wow, that's really interesting that, the progression of attitudes as you progress in a company from idea to traction and customer service, but also the range of attitudes. So starting to wrap things up here, one interesting thing is that, you're being very brave, right? Because you're tackling a very taboo topic, right? Which we just talked about, and also very brave in terms of geography. So how do you think about fear? Are you scared about this topic? I mean, like, does it ever get to you, or do you just whatever, haters gonna hate?
Again, yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I personally, I try to ignore all of the noises. Of course, I don't consider myself as a very strong person who can handle all of the emotions that well. I do feel hurt when people disagree with me or they don't see the value in my business or in me personally. But then I try to ignore all of the noises and just acknowledge them. Oh, some people would disagree with you and some people wouldn't see the value, but then that only means those people are not the customers or people you are trying to help. And then I try to allow myself to focus on what matters the most. The reason I started such a business is trying to help a lot of women who are struggling to get the basic sexual health care without judgment. And then those are the people who matter the most to me. So as long as they care about my business and then they feel we actually somewhat helped them in a way, then that's just good enough.
How do you remind yourself to be brave?
I have this life, not like a life motto, but then a thing I do whenever I feel very scared about a thing, I would try to force myself to be in that spot to experience the fear the most. And because I believe most of the time, if we feel scared about a thing, that's because of the projected fear inside our mind. It's not about the fear itself or the thing that scares us the most. So like in the beginning, I mentioned a story to you that I went to scuba diving without knowing how to swim when quite a couple of years ago. That was before I got my certificate. And that was actually when I went through a lot of life changes and trying to reposition myself in terms of career and then in terms of my life. And then one of the things I noticed that it was very minor was I was very scared of water. And but then I didn't know why, because I knew how to swim when I was a kid. And then when I started noticing my fear of the water, I made a decision. I should just get into the water and trying to see if this is actually the thing that scares me the most. If it is, what was the reason I'm so scared of water? So I went to, I remember it was in San Diego. I just went to the scuba diving institute and told them I need a session, but I don't really know how to swim. And then in San Diego, it's actually not, because it's right by the seashore. So they don't drive you on the boat into the water. They actually require you to swim towards the center of the water, a little bit off the seashore, and then you go diving there. That was probably one of the most scary experience I've ever got. But then after that, so for the entire time, it was very, very, very stressful for me to swim from the seashore to somewhere for someone who didn't know how to swim, and then diving into the water from there. But then after the whole experience, all of a sudden my fear towards water was just gone. So this is actually something I'm trying to encourage myself or make myself to do once a while. If I feel scared about something, I would actually force myself to do it or get into the center of the problem. And then I would know if that's actually, the thing, where the fear come from. And oftentimes that's when you learn, nothing is actually that scary if you actually do it. So when I first moved to Singapore, that was also, before I moved, everything sounded so scary. And a lot of people told me that was such a brave decision. But to me, it was more like an experiment. So I just come here to a new country because I didn't know if I could do it. But then if I just move and get in there, do my startup, maybe I would fail. But then most likely I would learn later. This is just some imaginary fear in my mind, and everything is manageable.
Wow. I mean, you can definitely draw a direct line between, what you just shared about the water and your fear and, obviously all of the dynamics of being a founder. So, we're coming up on time here, but, thank you so much. So what I really loved, I think it were 3 parts. I think the first part, of course, was, your honest take on what it like to grow up in Xi'an and Beijing and America. And, obviously the cultural differences at one level, but also what you grew in terms of skills and attitude over time. So that was awesome. And the second thing I really enjoyed was, of course, the dynamic around what it's like to found a business in sexual wellness in Southeast Asia, and obviously the dynamics about the market and your approach. But lastly, I think the part that really struck a chord with me, of course, the last bit, right, which is that, it's really about the fear, right? And doing it in some level. And at some level, the knowledge that if you do it, the fear will go away at some point of time. And I think that's such a beautiful story, not just, of course, for swimming, but also for being a founder. And for that, I really commend you for taking and jumping off the deep end into tackling such, not just being a founder, but also tackling a much needed problem for so many people across Southeast Asia.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share this episode with friends and colleagues. Sign up at www.jeremyau.com to discuss this episode with other community members in our forum. Stay well and stay brave.